Conversation this Wednesday evening. Great to see everybody who's here in person. Also, welcome to those who are joining us online. We are grateful for your presence here today. As you know, at this point, this is our third one, so now it's feeling like a tradition. This summer, through June and July, we've been taking the opportunity to invite some guests and to have some conversations around our new mission statement that we've adopted as a church, joining God's work of new creation, and to explore that with a number of folks, which also gives us a chance to live into one of the ways we want to express that mission, which is embracing all God's people. So we have a chance to put that into practice by embracing and welcoming some different folks to join us for these. And I'm excited about who we get to welcome our way tonight. That is Orlander Thomas. Orlander is the senior minister at the Southside Church of Christ in Durham, just across the way from us here. You started as an associate. You've been in the senior minister role 2019? 2020. Okay, so it's still new. Yeah, you got the new car smell and everything going. But I know we have a lot of connections with Southside and have just heard wonderful things about the ministry you're doing there and continuing on the good work that Brother Stevens has been doing there for so long, too. Before that, Orlander was at Liberty City Church of Christ in Miami, Florida, Orlander Boulevard Church of Christ in Compton, California. He's got a BS in Religious Studies from Southwestern Christian College in Terrell, Texas, pretty close to Abilene, where I went to school there, and an MDiv from Duke with a concentration in homiletics, which is a specialty in preaching, and with certifications in Black church studies and African American studies, or as part of that degree too. Wife is Brittany, who is here with us this evening as well. Hello, Brittany. We are really grateful to have you. Have been married since 2010. And 3 children, Omri. Now, I got this from your website. It said Bear in parentheses. Is that?
That's his nickname.
That's the nickname. Okay.
It hasn't stuck yet, but that's what his
okay.
aunt calls him. Yeah.
Okay, working on the nickname there. And then Orlander, who's OJ, and Brightly Rose. Always try to think about what are the connections of our guests to Comeville Road, and of course with Southside we have such a long history and a lot of back and forth there. But do I remember right that Karan Johnson, did she used to babysit you? Is that?
Wow, yeah. Well, I'll say this. Karan used to drive me to work. I worked at the church. We have a school, and when I graduated high school, I worked there for a year before I went and did my undergrad. And Karan was my neighbor, so I drove to school with her, rode with her to school to work every morning, and so we had long conversations every morning, as you can imagine. And so, I know Karan very well.
Yeah, so that's what I had you a little younger there, but that's a little bit older. But that's excellent. That is great. Well, we are so grateful that you're here, Orlander, and looking forward to talking with you tonight.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
As I mentioned, kind of the context for these conversations is we adopted our new mission statement, joining God's work of new creation, along with 3 ways we're hoping to express that mission as a church: by embracing all God's people, relying on the Holy Spirit, and joining Christ's global church in the ministry of reconciliation. So we're taking this summer as an opportunity to kind of explore that mission with different partners who may not be called to exactly the same mission, but certainly parallel missions in different churches. And you are unique in our guests in that you're the only other Durham-based minister that we have. And so we have some other Raleigh-based, but as I'm learning, being here, Raleigh and Durham are different. Those are sort of different contexts. And so I really wanted to have a conversation with you about Durham as a context for doing ministry. And I'll do a little bit of setting that up, some of my line of thinking there, and then we'll hear a lot more from you. It's really interesting to me that the letters we have in the New Testament are all named after the residents of cities. That's how we know them. It's the letter to the Colossians, or it's the letter to the Philippians, and they're all named after these Christians who are gathered in these cities. And that's how we come to know them. And we all learn from reading these different letters too, that even though they're all called to the same mission, the way that mission expresses itself is different, kind of depending on the context. And some of that has to do with the internal dynamics of the church. And we see that in a lot of the letters where Paul will sometimes say, like, Yoda and Syntyche, you two have a problem, you need to work it out. Those kinds of things are going on. But then also, there are dynamics related to what's it like to be a Christian in that city. And so we'll see some of the letters will address things like food sacrifice to idols. Or I remember when I learned studying the letters of Timothy about the context of Ephesus. And you notice in Timothy, he has a lot to say about women and how women are practicing their religion. And you learn in Ephesus, there's this big temple to the goddess Artemis. And there's a lot of conversation in that city about how are women religious. It kind of makes sense that, oh, this would be a topic that's happening here that may not be happening at other churches too. And so I'm always curious about that relationship between mission and context. How are those things in relationship with one another? So that's kind of the thing I was wanting to explore with you, is thinking about, that's something we share, is Durham as a context for doing ministry. So first, a little bit more autobiography. You're from Durham originally, grew up here, then moved away for a little while, and then came back to pick up your studies at Duke, which kind of gives you a unique vantage point on the city too, because you were here, and then you're gone, and then you're back. So I was wondering, just from your experience with that, what are some of the things you notice about what's happening in Durham, and maybe some of the changes that you saw with the coming and going?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Let me first say thank you for the invitation to be here, and so good to join you all tonight, and of course bring you greetings from just across town. And it's so good to see your face. It's good to see Carrie, and she reminded me of her name tonight, but I do remember her person when she came to visit Southside. But I like to be comfortable in these kind of situations, of course. And so if y'all don't mind, allow me to be a little comfortable here so I can answer as God would have me. But what I would say, Ben, is that when I moved away back in 2001, I think is when I left to go do my studies, 2002. And when I moved away, I said I was never coming back to Durham. That's number one.
Okay.
Once I got out, I said, man, I'm done, you know.
Famous last words.
It was just, I think for me as a young child, I just had a curious mind. And so I wanted to kind of see the world. I had an opportunity to be exposed. But the reality is I grew up in a very, in a context where there were very limited resources. So exposure was not always a thing that, you know, everyone in my community at those times actually had. And so I was really privileged in that way to be able to be exposed to other contexts. And so when I got out, we went and visited New Orleans one time. I said, man, I'm leaving when I get 18, and I'm just going, and I'm just never looking back. But also that had a lot to do with how I gauged or how I perceived opportunities in Durham. And everyone knows at that time, I feel like Durham was really, even though it wasn't, I mean, it was a small town. It can be considered that in many contexts. I mean, I've lived in places like Dallas and Los Angeles. And so, of course, Durham is a small town in comparison. But as I've come back, me and my wife, we would come back to visit. And I would always tell her about Durham, you know. And of course, we always had a good time coming back to visit family, but it was one of those things where you stay a couple of days and it's time to go back. But over the years, as we would travel, whether it was from Los Angeles or travel from Miami, we realized that there was a lot of development happening. I don't know, many of you, I'm sure, have been here long enough to know what Durham was like. But like I tell people this, like when you live in metroplexes, one of the things about a metroplex is that there is a lot of activity happening downtown, or there's a lot of things for you to do in centralized places. But Durham didn't really have that downtown life. It didn't have, it just didn't have some of those things that larger cities had. But when I would come back, college student, and you can imagine as a college student coming back like, hey, you know, Durham was boring back in the day, but it was actually, they had more to do. And so we just kind of attributed a lot of that to the development that was happening in the city. And then along with that development came, you know, growth. And so I think right before we moved back in 2015, we had saw a report online. It was done, I forget what source, but it had talked about Durham being one of the top 3 places at the time to move. and that growth in this area was happening at a rapid pace because of the development and because of the opportunities. And so I'll say, and hopefully that answers the question, that there's a lot more happening in this area today than it was before. And therefore, I also would attribute that to, or bringing along with that a lot of opportunities for growth and things of the sort. And so it's been a huge change, huge difference from when I was in high school to now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so, with that, from your perspective of since you've been kind of back, it's been 2015, so last 6 years or so. From your vantage point, what do you see as some of the major challenges for doing ministry in Durham in kind of that season of growth?
Yeah. So, and I'll reflect from the context of our ministry. So, Southside, for many of who have been there, we're kind of positioned in a centralized place. We're right on the edge of downtown Durham, right by North Carolina Central. So our community is what you would call very urban, um, and so for us, with a lot of the growth and development that's happening, what we're also seeing is that communities are changing now, right? Older homes have been torn down, newer homes have been built up, and then so the demographics in our communities are changing. Whereas those demographics are changing, there are still a lot of our members who may be in that area who might find themselves in positions where, because of the growth that's happening in the area, you have rising rent costs or prices, and as a result of that, some people are being dislocated from their homes. As a result of that, you have a number of other issues that are happening when we deal with issues of poverty and things of the sort. So for us, one of the things that I'm really trying to help, especially from a standpoint of vision perspective, preaching from the Word of God to the mission that we should embrace as a church, but to talk about the ministry of Christ, which was a ministry of the least of these. And so we think about those who don't have some of the things that they need on a daily basis, those who may come from more marginalized communities, who may have issues of poverty that they're dealing with. And so much of our ministry is formulated around that. One of the main things that we have going on right now is we've had a food bank ministry for years, and that food bank ministry is probably one of the highlights, certainly, of Southside. And we participate every week in giving food to maybe over 200 to 300 people from our community. It's so much so the where there are a number of food banks located in our community, but what happens is that after a while, those food banks and those who go to those food banks, the word of mouth travels, and so oftentimes we'll meet new people who are coming to Southside's Food Bank because they heard about us from another food bank in the community. And so the challenges that exist are the challenges of resource, making sure that you have enough resource to be able to meet the needs, especially the immediate needs of members who may find themselves in those situations, but also meeting the needs of the community that we are positioned within. And so I think that's one of the ways I kind of see those challenges, and we've been talking through them. As a leadership team, we talk about some of the challenges that we have and the changing demographic, right? Which are a number of things that, when the demographic changes, you got to also start to look at the mission a little bit more and make sure that the mission or the vision of the church is a little bit more inclusive, So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we can really resonate with a lot of those same realities as we think about doing ministry here. What are some of the things that are exciting you about doing ministry in Durham in this season right now?
Well, I mean, I think so with the development and the growth, I think we can talk about, larger population, so we have a greater opportunity to grow as a church. And one of the things I used to always tell my wife is that when it came down time to decide where I would do ministry, I knew I did not want to be in a small town. And that's no shade on small towns. It's just, I know myself, right? And my wife would tell you, she say, you know, you just get bored quick with stuff. And that's just a reality, right? That's a reality I live with. And so one of the things that I tried to do as I was matriculating through undergrad and in graduate school was thinking about places, larger cities, where I could spend time in a context, doing ministry in those contexts, so that I could be better equipped, you know, when I got to wherever it was that I felt God was leading me. And so now, as I look at some of the challenges, I think that, or some of the opportunities that excite me, is that we do have a larger population in the city of Durham. And not only that, we have a large youth population in Durham because of the schools and the universities. And so I'm excited about trying to create new avenues of ministry. One of the things that Southside has had for years, we had a very vibrant college ministry at one point in time. And many of those college students who grew up or who matriculated during their college years here, many of them are still a part of our congregation today. Some have moved on, taken jobs in other places. But I think in that we discovered a formula, and that is that one of the ways that you assure, and of course God takes care of the church, but one of the ways that you can ensure the growth and the sustainability of the church is you want to make sure you're always creating or exploring opportunities to engage younger people, college students, you know, because these students are going to graduate. Of course, the job market when I graduated was pretty bad. It's still not that much better, and so a lot of times there would be a limited amount of opportunities. And so the way we look at it is many of our college students who are here with us now are going to graduate, and there won't be something for them to go immediately to. And so this is our opportunity to kind of engage them, because maybe they may look to stay in this area, and we need that. We'll need that in terms of bringing new life to the church and make sure the church continues to grow in that way. Also, finding ways to really approach and engage some of the challenges in the community, you know, by way of resources. How can we channel resources into communities that most need them? And so those are some of the opportunities that we're exploring as a church right now, and we're doing some of that, you know, creatively, you know, seeking partnerships out around the country, using some of my network at Duke, some of the relationships I've built, and we've been able to kind of do some things with Duke Divinity, some partnerships, you know, creating different programs that will help us to kind of serve new populations or new people in our area. And so, so some of those things excite me about, especially, let's not ignore the pandemic, right? So that's another thing. So whatever church was and whatever we were doing before the pandemic, that's changing quickly, because what I do believe too is that church may look a little different after post-pandemic. And so we're also thinking about and reimagining what are ways to do ministry post-pandemic. Some of that stuff won't really be clearly revealed to us until we actually find ourselves in that place. And so those are some of the things that we're trying to be proactive about now, though. Having those conversations early and making sure that we explore them in a way where we might need to embrace something different. And if we do need to embrace something different, we don't want the members to become uncomfortable. So we talk about that stuff now, you know, because these may be some new realities that we have to face.
Yeah, I wonder if you might say, if you're comfortable saying anything more about that. Like, we find ourselves in such a similar place where, you know, we're kind of in this season now of regathering our folks physically, or we're learning how much online digital stuff is going to be a part of the future. We're not sure to what degree that'll be, and kind of thinking through some of those things. And just that sense of who are we as we come back, and who are some of the new folks who may be coming our way with this. So what are some of the things y'all are learning, or maybe new questions you have related to that?
So one of the areas that I am excited to explore is, what does it mean to create an online ministry, or what we would call a hybrid type ministry, where you will have members who will place membership from around the country who may never step foot into your sanctuary. because through the testimony of many people that we've had an opportunity to speak to already online who have talked about us being positioned to where they can worship with us on a regular basis. And this is what's happening because Southside is uniquely positioned in the sense that we've been able to do some things by way of really stepping into this new era of ministry. So we've embraced things like adding audio and visual equipment. That's something that we were actually already in the process of doing the beginning of 2020. We had talked about doing a church renovation because many of you know Southside's been around for 38 years. Of course, Cold Mill Road had a lot to do with us, in our establishment. And but out of the time that we've been on Elmira, the church has been the way that it has been, for a while. And so it's been 20 plus years without changing the pews or the carpet. So we said, hey, listen, let's give this church a facelift first of all. And so one of the things that we agreed to do was to renovate. So in the process of doing that renovation, we also tried to budget for equipping the sanctuary with audio visual equipment that would be kind of more later technology. And so now we're in the process, as we've done that, we've also seen our engagement online increase. Of course, Southside has about 400 plus members, and so every week when we're going live, we're seeing those numbers because we were at one point in time we were only allowing maybe 20 in the sanctuary. So we were still seeing those numbers online, but then we were also seeing more numbers. Like I think when we first started our YouTube channel, we was probably right around 400, 500 that were tuning in. And there have been weeks where we've actually seen that number go up to maybe 700, 800, or whatever the case may be. As a result of that, there's some people who found themselves geographically located in places where churches did not have the resources nor the equipment to be able to project online. And so we've received some of those folk who have become a part of our fellowship, become a part of our community. Some may be family of members who already attend Southside or whatever the case may be. And so what we really talked about, of course, we know what Hebrews says, forsaking not the assembly of yourselves together. So we've had some interesting conversations in this last year where we've had some very opinionated members about worshiping online at all, because there's an expectation in Scripture that we come together, we assemble. And so we've had to have conversations to be very sensitive to the concerns of some of the membership. But we've also been able to have a conversation about creating online ministries where we're actually engaging people who may never come to the church. So we have K groups, of course, now, which are like corner groups, zone groups, and they're led by zone leaders. The same way we have zone leaders who are positioned throughout the city in certain sections of town where they're closely located to members in those areas, we've also been postulating the idea of what does it look like to do an online ministry or online K group where we have a leader who will engage those members from around the country. Yeah. I'll give one example too, because of course we would say, well, when things get better, then why don't we allow those members to go back to the local congregations? Well, there's also situations like there's one gentleman who has been attending our services since 2020, and he hadn't been to church in almost 15 years. And now he's been attending service with us, and he's in California, by the way. He's my wife's uncle, by the way. Let me give you that. Drop that in there. And he's been attending service now every Sunday. And the way we know he's there is because not only does he comment in the chats, but he's also a regular giver every week. And so this ministry's been helpful to him. And so we want to make sure that we continue to reach those who may be in a position where they're in a place where they're just discouraged with the church. They have given up on church. And who knows who we can reach. And so this is the mentality. We may be able to reach people in markets that are not close or local because maybe they're in a place where there's just nothing that's appealing to them. And so this is something that we also explore. What does that look like? It's not something we really have a lot of experience with, so it's something that we got to spend more time researching and also more time kind of engaging to see what it looks like as we grow.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting to get there too. The way we started thinking about Durham as a context, but really we're in this time now where online has opened up this new context that we have to think about so differently than we did before, because it's not quite tethered to some of the same geography and physicality. And so, yeah, I appreciate you thinking through some of that with us. Let's broaden out the conversation a bit now to invite some others. Those who are online, if you have any questions you'd like to submit by chat, we can make sure that those are shared with the group or any folks who are in the room. I think John Shown's got our microphone here.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So thank you, Orlander. And I know a number of us have enjoyed some of your online Sunday services and your Wednesday night. I noticed last fall you had a Wednesday night class that had, it had a lot of student voices. I think it had some college student voices. So I was just curious if that's something that's ongoing. And then I also had a question. I was looking at your calendar a while back, and I think there was like almost a week-long youth rally, maybe middle of July. Am I right about that? And so I was curious, is that youth, I didn't realize how many members you had. Is that all your own youth, or are you like combining with other groups of youth from other places?
Yeah, so to the first question, what we try to do, what I tried to do in the latter part of last year, as we were getting, so we had started using Zoom in March, and it was kind of a static type of, setup, right? We were trying to continue our Bible class, so whatever we were doing prior to the pandemic, we were trying to continue to provide those offerings on Zoom, the Zoom platform. But for me, I also felt, because I was doing a lot of the teaching at that time, of course, when the world shut down, everything shut down. Like even members who were teaching in Bible classes and things of the sort, it just kind of was this, I guess everybody was kind of not sure, what do we do? What are we going to continue to do? So really, everything just kind of ceased at a moment. So what we did was, as we got to a later part of the year, we wanted to switch up the type of engagements we were having on Zoom. So we wanted to welcome in some different voices. So that panel that Carrie refers to is where we did a panel where we talked about what was pretty much going on in the country, but we wanted to hear it from the perspective of our young people, and it was from the perspective of our college students who were at school when the year might have been away at school, but now everyone's back home in Durham. So we wanted to kind of create this space where they would have a space to share what's going on, their opinions, their views about what's happening in the world and how it's impacting them. We did a number of series like that, where we just explored different topics. We explored stuff like vaccinations, like there's a high level of distrust in minority communities when it comes to healthcare and medicine and things of the sort. So we wanted to have conversations that would contribute to that dialogue and maybe help to prepare members who might be reluctant to even think about taking vaccines and stuff like that. Because we believe that those are things that certainly as a community, as an African American community, that we need to embrace. And so we wanted to be able to kind of educate and inform our members. And so those are some things that we've done. They were really successful for us. And so we're hoping to do more things like that. We had something scheduled for May where we were going to actually, and we're still going to do it later in the year, where I had basically leaned in to talk to some of our brothers and sisters around the country who may be working already in the academic space to come in and have deeper theological conversations around some hot topics. Topics like the roles of women, topics like, worship and worship practices and things of the sort. Something I'm still looking to do, by the way. Of course, I got to be careful because you know how that is too. But it's something I think that I have regular conversations with Brother Stevens. I have conversations with some of our other leaders to talk about just things that we need to do that will be relevant for the congregation, but also helpful. And then to the last question, the youth conference that we have in July, that's actually a national conference. It's put on by a host of churches. And we usually take our youth every year. It is our hope that it would actually happen again this year, but right now it looks like it's not going to happen. And so if it doesn't happen, then this year our youth ministry is already planning to do something to kind of take the place of it. So we may do something like a camping trip, or a trip to the mountains or something like that for a weekend or so. But it's just creating other space and other opportunities to allow for our membership to come together and to engage one another, which is something we've also done, right? Like, even though we've been at a distance for this past year, and we understand people's hesitance, because we didn't have a vaccine and things were still spiraling out of control. But we've also tried to create opportunities where we could come together as a church and do it safely. So we have an annual cookout every year. So this year we didn't do the annual cookout at a nice park. We usually do a park in Raleigh or something. This year we just did a parking lot. What did we call it? We had a good name for it too. It was I wish I could remember the name. I came up with the name anyway. But it was a way to kind of corral the members, bring them to the parking lot. Let's just see each other. We'll be at a distance. I almost had it. It was right on the edge of my tongue. But whatever it was, we basically told people, hey, bring your grill, bring your food, bring a little extra for somebody else. And we kind of just enjoyed our time just in the parking lot, kind of just seeing the membership. And we've done things like that through this pandemic, just to give members an opportunity to see each other, even if it's from a distance, because there are a lot of members who really thrive on community. And so we want to make sure we try to explore that a little bit more to give them opportunity, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I think if you wait for the mic, that'll help our online folks.
We were talking right before we started about how your congregation has progressed through COVID measures. You might just summarize that for our group, since we're right in the throes of thinking that through also.
Yeah. So we did not experience, we were concerned because some churches experienced weeks where they didn't have service or couldn't have service because they just wasn't equipped to do so. Now, we were able to continue service, the continuity of service throughout the entire year. And of course, we perfected that over time. But somewhere around, I think, August, we had already been considering what would it look like to have a full return. Not a full return, but a return of allowing some people back into the space. So in August, we sent out a letter to the members to inform them that we were going to provide 50 slots for members who needed to be in worship. We did ask members who did not need to be there, who was not like really struggling without that personal touch and connection. We asked them to kind of leave those spots open for people who really needed to come to the building. And so in August, we started with 50 members. And we did that all the way up until probably February. In February, we kind of upped the number a little bit more. So I think we went from 50 slots to maybe 100. We never got 100 to register, by the way. Like this is just a new thing that's just happened because, of course, more people are vaccinated now. But in the process of doing that, we even as we were worshiping, of course, we were following CDC guidelines. And so if people were worshiping, we were worshiping with masks. Of course, we also marked areas in the sanctuary that it was safe to sit, where people would be 6 feet socially distant, and things of the sort. So we did that, but now we're just in the process of now kind of taking the number up a little bit higher. So we probably will kind of go maybe up to 200. That's what we're thinking. But also we're getting the church prepared because we have a lot of members who have been worshiping who have been complaining about the mask and preaching and then also singing. I know it's difficult to preach and sing with a mask, right? So I understand how it can be uncomfortable and inconvenient. So we are allowing, or we're giving people the opportunity this coming Sunday. If you want to attend worship and you don't want to have to wear your mask, then you would have to provide proof to our task force of your COVID vaccination card. And that's only for those who are willing to share. We understand this medical information is sensitive information. Of course, we also, one of the things that we also have done in the process of worshiping every week, we also have a waiver that goes out every week. So in order for you to come to worship, you can't come without signing that waiver first and making sure that we're covering ourselves from a liability perspective. So members, and really it's more so making sure members are aware that we're not saying we're creating a space that is 100% safe from contracting COVID. But as you come to any public gathering, you understand the risk that you accept or that you take in coming. And so that's what that waiver was about. But now as we try to make this move to allow members to worship without being masked, then we will ask, if you want to do that, you would have to share the vaccination card with the team. The team will, of course, check you off to let everyone know that this person has gone through all of the right measures, have done everything they're supposed to do. They're fully vaccinated. And of course, that's defined as well. What does fully vaccinated mean? And so we're getting geared up for that this Sunday. I don't know how it's going to go. What I will say is that I did have a meeting yesterday, and as that letter went out, I think yesterday. So right now we got about 10 members or so that have submitted their vaccination cards, which is another thing. Like, how do you do that? And then you got to think about the conversation of members saying, hey, why would I give you my information like that? Whatever the case may be. Those are things that exist. And so we wanted to also be prepared for that conversation. So we wanted to make sure people knew that we're not forcing you to do this. And if you will be uncomfortable worshiping with anybody being unmasked, we want you to also be aware of that as well. And so it's something that we've asked the congregation to support us, to be cooperative if you're willing, as we understand that the decisions that are made, not everything is fully is received with approval, with everybody's approval. But we try to do what's best for the whole, and that's kind of the mentality we've been using. So, and it's still a wait and see, right? Just we'll see what happens as we continue to move forward. But we're happy to say that we haven't had any cases. So that's a good sign that all the measures that we have implemented, we haven't had any cases of COVID or a COVID outbreak at the congregation.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I'm struck as you were sharing that, just one of the things that's happened as we've all shared this experience, I know for me, is it's made me see how all of us churches, like, we're going through the same problems. And we all come to different solutions, and the way we problem solve it, but it's created an opportunity, I hope, that we really carry out of this too, where I hope we see each other as we really and truly are. We're in the same thing, and we're trying to follow the same God, and we're worshiping together. And so appreciate you just being open about sharing that too, that I think some of these challenges, I hope, have revealed to us just the commonality of what we share. Thanks, Orlander. I mentioned to you, each one of our guests, our mission is joining God's work of new creation. This sense of joining. We're recognizing God's up to something in the world. We don't have the exclusive take on it. And so something I'm asking each of our guests is just if you have some sort of invitation you might like to give to us of something to join, whether that's a practice to consider, something we should be praying for, something we should be paying attention to. And so as you think about that, do you have anything you might like to invite us to join in as a result of this conversation tonight?
I think to be one of the things that I'm finding to be just one of the greatest challenges about a city that's faced with a lot of growth opportunity is that in all the growth that that we have an opportunity to see in Durham, With that growth comes opportunities, but opportunity is not always explored equitably because not everybody has the same footing. And so, as we see Durham continue to blossom and bloom as a city, to always constantly be mindful of those who may not have a good footing to be able to explore some of these growth opportunities, and to be prayerful about ministries like Southside, ministries like Cold Mill, who can assist in helping some of these families that may have a hard time dealing with the growth. And I think that's something that we've been very conscious of, and we're looking for ways to formulate new partnerships, community partnerships, partnerships that they may not necessarily be something that we're familiar with in terms of maybe being more ecumenical in partnering with other churches to do the work that needs to be done in the community. And I think by exploring those opportunities, it also creates a chance for rich dialogue and discussion. And so thinking about those who may not be able to explore some of those opportunities equitably, and also being prayerful for how some of those communities are dealing with the changes. I was just driving yesterday down Austin Avenue, Angier Avenue, or Austin. It's one of the two. By North Carolina Central, that Austin Avenue. And there's a whole block on Austin Avenue that literally there may have been 10 to 12 homes on that corner. And all those homes in literally a matter of a week have been knocked down. And all I can think about was who was living there first. And of course, they might not have been there for some time, but at some point in time, there was somebody living in those places. Where are they now? That's something that I'm thinking about as a ministry. And I'm also thinking about how can the church be more actively involved in what's happening in our communities to make sure that if there are things like, property development that's happening in our community, to make sure those who may be impacted by it, that we can assist them in some way. And so being prayerful about the growth that's happening. I mean, let me say this, I'm excited about the growth. I'm excited about, things like we've been exploring conversations about Apple, Apple relocating or, having one of their, whatever you call it, what do you call it? Having a location here in Durham. You think about Google, it's already here. Those are going to bring jobs, and it's going to be really good for the city, but it's also going to be bad for real estate, bad for the housing market, and bad for the rent district. And so thinking about how we're going to be able to deal with those challenges, because it will create problems, and I think we have to be as God's people ready to dispatch and to help get involved in various ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks everybody for being here. I'd like to close this evening with a prayer, saying a prayer for you and for Southside and your ministry. And thanks again for your presence here this evening. God, we give you thanks for who you are. We thank you for the gift of the church that Christ died for and was raised to establish in power. God, we're so thankful for Southside, and we're thankful that they're doing good ministry here in Durham. We're grateful for Orlander and his ministry there, and just ask that you work powerfully through him and through that church as they're seeking to minister in our community. God, we pray for us as a church too, as we share in that work and share in this city. As Orlander drew our attention to, we live in a time just with so many opportunities and so many challenges, and often they're two sides of the same coin. So give us godly wisdom, give us courage, and give us a clear sense to know how to join in the work that you're doing here in this place. God, we thank you for Jesus, and we pray in his name. Amen. All right, thank you.